Whispers in the Dark. I arrived in Ohio on a rainy October afternoon. The sky was gray and the wind blew fallen leaves through the empty streets of the neighborhood, giving the scene a somewhat melancholy air. It was as if nature was in tune with my state of mind, still shaken by the recent loss of my husband and son. The decision to change my life and city came in an attempt to escape the painful memories that every corner of my old home evoked. The apartment I rented was on the 5th floor of an old but well-kept building, with an exposed brick facade that gave it a rustic charm. The move wasn't difficult. I didn't bring much, just my clothes, a few books and my laptop to keep writing. Everything else I decided to leave behind as a way of trying to make a fresh start. As I opened the door to the apartment, I smelled a musty odor mixed with the scent of fresh paint, an indication that the place had recently been renovated. I put my things on the floor of the living room, which was empty except for a floor lamp that cast a dim light on the worn wooden floor. I went to the window and looked out onto the street below. The view was really beautiful, just as the realtor had promised, with a line of trees that went out of sight and a park in the distance. I spent the rest of the day unpacking and trying to make the space as cozy as possible. But as I tidied up, I began to notice strange little details. Marks on the walls that looked like deep scratches, doors that creaked more than usual, and a constant feeling of being watched. At first, I tried to ignore it, attributing everything to the stress of moving and my recent loss. But as night fell and the noises began, I realized that perhaps there was something more in that apartment than met the eye. The first few nights in the new apartment, I could hardly sleep. I've always been someone who adjusts slowly to new environments, and this place, with all its peculiarities, was definitely no exception. But there was something else, something I couldn't quite explain. It started with the noises, little pops and creaks that you'd expect from an older building, but they seemed intentional somehow. One night, while I was trying to concentrate on a new book I was writing, I distinctly heard the sound of crying. It was low and muffled, as if it was coming from inside the walls. At first, I thought it was someone in the hallway or in another apartment, but the crying seemed to be right there in the room with me. I stopped typing and listened, my heart beating fast. The sound stopped as abruptly as it started, leaving a heavy silence in the air. Over the next few days, the phenomena began to intensify. Books that I was sure I had left on the coffee table appeared on the floor in the morning. Once, a painting on the wall in the hallway was upside down. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I had bumped into it without noticing, but deep down I knew it wasn't possible. Then something happened that really scared me. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when a glass in the cupboard exploded. Yes, it exploded, as if someone had hit it with all their might. The shards flew everywhere, and I stood there helplessly, staring at the open cupboard, trying to figure out if it had really happened. That night, I hardly slept, jumping at every sound. The apartment seemed to breathe with a life of its own, an icy breath that made me shiver. I knew something was very wrong, but part of me still resisted accepting that it could be something supernatural. It was as if, by admitting it, I was opening the door to more occurrences, giving permission for the whole thing to invade my life. And, somehow, I had the feeling that this was exactly what they wanted. After the incident with the glass, I decided I needed to talk to someone in the building. Maybe they knew something that could explain what was going on. The next morning, I knocked on the door of Mrs. Thompson, the neighbor who lived downstairs. She was an older woman, with silver hair always tied up in an impeccable bun. Her apartment was cozy and full of plants, which gave an air of life and color to the environment, so different from mine. When I explained the reason for my visit, Mrs. Thompson invited me in and offered me a cup of tea. As we sat at her small kitchen table, I noticed that she seemed a little hesitant, as if pondering what to say. After a long sigh, she began to speak. "I've lived here for over 30 years, she said, with a voice that mixed caution and tiredness. "And I've seen a lot of people come and go from this apartment of yours. Most of them don't stay long. They say strange things happen, sounds, unexplained movements, just like you described. I asked her if she knew what could be causing it, and it was then that she lowered her voice, as if she feared being overheard by someone other than us. Bad things, my dear. Very bad things have happened in that apartment. Some say it's haunted by spirits who find no rest. When I pressed her for more details, she hesitated, looking around as if to make sure we were really alone. Many years ago, before you moved in, a tragedy happened there. A family was found dead under mysterious circumstances. The police never solved the case, and ever since, residents have been reporting incidents. The news left me cold, but it also sparked a need to understand more about my apartment's past. I asked her if she knew anything else, any details that could help me. Mrs. Thompson shook her head slowly. All I know is that everyone who tried to live there after the incident reported feeling a heavy presence, as if something or someone didn't want them to be there. I thanked him for the information and the tea, my mind spinning with the new revelations. Knowing now that it wasn't just my imagination, I decided I needed to find out more. Something told me that understanding what happened in that apartment was crucial, not only for my peace of mind, but perhaps even for my safety. Determined to better understand the history of my apartment, I decided to look for old records that might give me more clues. The local library became my starting point. There, I delved into newspaper archives and public records, looking for any mention of the building and past incidents. After hours of leafing through yellowed pages and browsing databases, I finally found what I was looking for. It was a newspaper clipping from 20 years ago, with the grim headline, "Family Tragedy Shocks Local Community." The article described how a family of 3, a couple and their young son, were found dead in their apartment, exactly where I now lived. The circumstances were murky, with signs of violence, but no clear conclusion as to what really happened. The case was shelved as unsolved, leaving a permanent mystery and, apparently, a disturbed energy. With this information in hand, my next step was to visit the police station. There, I spoke to a police officer who, initially reluctant, ended up showing me the case file after I insisted on the importance of the information for my safety. Leafing through the documents, I noticed references to reports from neighbors about the family's strange behavior in the days leading up to the incident, as well as mentions of possible paranormal activity that they believed was taking place in the apartment. Equipped with these new details, I decided that the best way to understand the past events and the possible presences in my new home would be through a more direct approach: a seance. I organized everything meticulously, choosing a full moon night to try to make contact, hoping that the moon's energy would increase my chances of communication. The night of the seance had arrived. With the apartment lit only by candles and the circle of salt meticulously traced on the living room floor, I felt a mixture of fear and anticipation. Taking a deep breath, I began the seance, calling softly to the spirits who resided there, waiting for some sign. The atmosphere changed rapidly. The air seemed heavier, and a cold breeze began to circulate through the room, even though the windows were closed. Indistinct whispers filled the space, increasing my anxiety. I kept my concentration, asking the spirits to manifest themselves in a way that we could communicate. Suddenly, the atmosphere cooled even more, and the sound of footsteps echoed through the apartment, as if someone invisible was walking between the candles. "Who's there? What do you want?" I asked, my voice shaky but firm. A male voice answered clearly, a voice I had never heard before. "It's not safe here. Go away." The urgency in the voice was palpable, making my heart race. Books began to fall from the shelves without anyone touching them, and a dark figure passed quickly out of the corner of my eye. I swallowed, realizing that the situation was getting out of hand. "Please, if there's anything I can do to help, tell me now," I begged, hoping there might be a way to calm the spirits. It was then that the voice came again, calmer, but still full of sadness. "Protect yourself. It's not for you to sort out." The candles flickered as if they were about to go out, and the whole room shook slightly, as if something very large had moved around us. It was enough to convince me. I finished the session quickly, blowing out the candles and undoing the circle of salt. That night, I hardly slept, pondering the spirit's final words. In the morning, my decision was made. I packed my bags, leaving behind the apartment and the mysteries it held. As I rode down the elevator, I felt a sense of relief mixed with deep sadness, relief at escaping that oppressive energy, and sadness for all the souls who were still trapped there, waiting for peace. I knew that place wasn't for me. It was a chapter one needed to close, no matter how alluring the mystery. I didn't look back. My brief stay in the apartment in Ohio taught me more about the boundaries between the known and the unknown than I could have imagined. Despite my initial search for answers and a new life, I discovered that not all mysteries are meant to be solved, at least, not by us. Experience has shown me that sometimes the best decision is to walk away, especially when forces beyond our comprehension make it clear that we are not welcome. Now, in a new place, with the past and the spirits of Ohio left behind, I can try to rebuild my life with a new perspective on what it means to be safe and at peace.